There's some funny characters that sometimes we don't think about a whole lot. Jesus goes to the Garden of Gethsemane to be with his Father, to pray before his crucifixion, before his betrayal. Peter, James, and John are there in the garden with him, trying to pray and mostly sleeping. You may have had that experience in your own spiritual life at some point. And Jesus comes back to him a couple times and says, "Hey, can't you wait? Can't you pray with me?" But the night is getting later. The darkness is getting heavier. The dew is starting to rise off the ground. The coolness of the night air has set in. And suddenly through the trees, they start to see the flicker of torches moving towards them. The noise of a mob marching, stomping, walking, moving, yelling, shouting starts to move towards them. Jesus says, "They're here. Now's the time." They move closer and closer and closer. And there's Peter, James, and John coming out of sleep, bewildered as to what's happening. Judas in the head of the mob who's betrayed him, his disciple who's betrayed him. The mob moving forward with guards and Roman soldiers coming up to Jesus. And Jesus saying, "Who are you looking for?" "We're looking for Jesus of Nazareth, I'm he." Now, if you were a good storyteller, and if you were making a really good story, this would be one of the key moments where you could really pull out all the stops. Because this would be a great time for Jesus to really kick loose and kick some tail. I mean, imagine the scene. He stands up. Suddenly, lightning, thunder, flashes, power, explosions. Jesus moves into Matrix-like movements, sending them flying across the garden, wrapping around trees, throwing them outside of the garden, flying through the air. Doesn't happen. There is one cool moment when they say, "Who are you looking?" He says, "Who are you looking for?" Jesus of Nazareth. And they fall down. Apparently an angel appears. They were a little too aggressive, and Jesus and God said, "Okay, just calm down on my son just for a minute." But even that doesn't stop them, because they get up and they don't stop. They don't stop. They come up and Judas kisses them and they arrest Jesus. And at this point, the disciples are thinking, "Okay, now's the time. You've done it before. You've walked through crowds that wanted to destroy you. You can do this. Move." And Jesus does nothing except to start to follow and to say, you're here for me. Leave these guys alone." Mark chapter 14, verse 50 then says, "Then all his disciples deserted him and ran away. One young man following behind him was clothed only in a long linen shirt. When the mob tried to grab him, he slipped out of his shirt and ran away naked." There's a lot of interesting characters around this story that we don't think about. I like Simon's wife. Simon's the guy that when Jesus is on his way to the crucifixion, he's in the mob. Apparently, perhaps passing through, one of the people coming in to pass over, to seeing what's going on, seeing, "Oh, is this the Jesus that I was looking for?" Kind of confused, seeing what's going on. And Jesus is fallen, and you got to understand from some interpretations of what happened, they didn't use the vertical beam. They didn't just use them and get rid of them. They reused those. So those would stay at the site of crucifixion. The crossbeam was all that a convicted person would carry with them. So they would take the crossbeam and lay it over their back and tie their hands to the crossbeam. That way, if they fell, they'd have nothing to catch themselves with. And so Jesus, who has been up all night long, hasn't eaten since the Last Supper, is fairly weak, has been beaten a couple times, hasn't had food or water, anything like that, is a bit weak. And you got to understand, for Jesus to be weak is something, because the guy walked everywhere he went. He did not have a moped. He did not have a Hummer, which would have been a plug of the old bumper stickers. What would Jesus drive? Would have been a pickup probably, but he was a carpenter. He didn't have any of that. He walked. And as a carpenter, when you went to build something, you went and cut down your own tree and you drug it home. Jesus was built. Okay, so for Jesus to be tired means he was really tired.